Here's what's coming up in episode 138. Barrie John.
And we just started using the board between us. And as soon as we both touch it, it was almost like an electrical current going through it. You know, it just picked up instantly. I know we've had hands form in the circle. We've had faces coming out of the wall in the room. We've heard voices. We've heard babies crying in the room. You know, lots of sort of physical things, you know, and a lot of movement around, obviously me, because I sit in the cabinet, but there's always a lot of colour, a lot of light, almost as though there's shadows moving around me. I've never had anything that's certainly not come through on a demon level, but I've had things that have come through that have made me feel uncomfortable. You know, things that have probably just given me that sort of spine tingling feeling, you know, that chilling feeling that you just feel like somebody's just walked over your grave.
Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Today, we talk to Barrie John, who is a multi-award-winning psychic TV medium, presenter, broadcaster, speaker, paranormal investigator, and columnist, with some 25 to 30 years experience of working within the public eye via stage demonstrations, TV, media, public events, and workshops, and has been seen and heard on national and international television and radio. In 2008, he appeared on Living TV's Most Haunted, and since has appeared on regular slots with the BBC, ITV's This Morning, and Channel 5, Live with Gabby and The Right Stuff. Also working alongside Sky TV with investigations into the Moore murders, as well as completing the series of Haunted Leads alongside the Yorkshire Evening Post. He has experience of working with the police and most recently with Australian police to investigate unsolved murder and missing victim cases. He regularly appears at psychic, spiritual, and paranormal events, both nationally and internationally, from mind, body, and spirit events to well-being events. You can learn more about Barrie John by simply visiting barriejohn.com. And that's BarrieJohn.com. Welcome to the Parlor, Barrie.
Hi.
I am so excited. We have already had our share of giggles this morning as we record. Well, I guess evening for you. So we are warmed up and ready to go. How are you?
I'm really good, and I'm really looking forward to the show. And as you say, it's evening here in Sherwood Forest in the UK. What time are we? Well, yeah, it's evening now. So it'll be nice to speak to somebody on a morning breakfast show, shall we say?
I have to be honest. It's not really morning. It's very much afternoon, but on my weekends, it's morning.
There we go then. Yeah, we'll stick with that one.
Okay. Well, we like to offer imaginary parlor drinks here. So what can we get you today?
Oh, do you know, for me, I think it's just got to be a black coffee today.
Okay, we can do that. You were recently on Karen Dahlman's YouTube show, and she recommended we connect, and so we did. And I'm so jealous that you guys got to hang out and work with each other a bit recently over on your side of the pond. I have not gotten to meet Karen physically yet. We're going to meet this summer, but I'm so insanely jealous, and it was cool to see that you guys hit it off really well.
We did, yeah. And I mean, it was such a pleasure really working with Karen. You know, we both have a very big passion for, you know, the Ouija boards and the talking boards, and, you know, people always run a mile, but, you know, working with Karen, it was fun. You know, we got on very well. We got some good information through. And the people that we were working with over here really enjoyed it as working together. We gave them a different insight. So it was fantastic. But what a great lady, a really, really great lady. And, we've kept in touch now since last year.
Now, were you guys teaching others when you were getting together, working together, or was this just fun that you guys were having?
No. We were teaching people. So we were talking to them about how to use the board, how to use it respectfully, how to keep it simple and straightforward. And we was working with about 50, 60 people at any one time, doing almost like a paranormal investigation, I suppose, to a point. But I remember, we were at a lovely venue over here called Coombe Abbey near Coventry. And myself and Karen one morning just decided to go outside, take the board. We sat on this lovely stone bench, sat there, and we just started using the board between us. And as soon as we both touch it, it was almost like an electrical current going through it. It just picked up instantly. And I so wished, and we both said this, I so wished that we'd have spent more time actually doing it for ourselves, and not just for other people all the time.
And on her show, you had lots of advice for people who are starting out working with the Ouija board, or maybe who are struggling to get communication from their board. And that's me. I mean, Karen's been talking me through that for years. And my board still gives me the silent treatment. And I always joke about how it's sitting here just being a coaster on my desk.
but sometimes with people, they try so hard. It's like with mediumship. Some people just try too hard with it. And instead of just going, right, the spirit world, we're here, let me, show me what you can do. We try and push it too much, and it almost loses the link a little bit, if that makes sense, and I think just go with it. Just use your gut feeling, see where it goes and see where it leads you.
Yeah, that's very similar to the advice that Karen often gives me. She's just like, let go, just let go.
Yeah, and it's no different to when I teach people, mediumship, working with the psychic ability. People, they try to push it too much. And when I'm working, I'm always very sort of quick fire with people. I go, right, tell me what you're getting. What are you getting now? How's it working now? And sometimes they look at me as if say, oh, you're just pushing me too much. Well, it's not the fact I'm pushing them. It's the fact that the way that we work with our spiritual work, keeping going and keeping that momentum going is the best way to do it. That's when things start coming out or start happening, especially in terms of Ouija boards.
Can I ask what your first experience at the Ouija board was like, and did it come easy for you?
Oh, honestly, I mean, I'm really glad you've asked that, because that's not a question a lot of people ask me. And I remember, I've always played around with the spiritual field for many, many years. I was brought up with it with my parents. It was fantastic for me to play, And I remember one day a group of friends, and we weren't very old, we must have only been about 12, 13. So we weren't very old at all. And we decided to do a Ouija board at a friend's house, and we were, going, right, who's there? Is anybody there? And we got quite a bit of information. And I remember, we started to hear things on shelves starting to vibrate in cabinets and all sorts. And as a group of children, you're actually at that point where you're thinking, oh, should we stop this? Is there something here? Have we opened a portal or a doorway up to something? But I've got to say, it wasn't frightening at all. It really wasn't frightening. There's something about the feeling of working with the spirit world that just gives you this comfort of things happening, or this comfort that something's coming through. And I remember it very, very clear. We'd literally made our own Ouija board. We'd done it out of pieces of paper with all the letters on and the numbers, just put them around a big table. And we just used a glass, and I always say this to people now, you don't need fancy boards. You don't need, a Ouija board that's been made for you. Do it yourself, make one up. And it's amazing the things that do come through. But again, I always say to people, use it respectfully, use it knowledgeably. Don't go testing it or trying it or being quite condescending, I suppose, in a way. Just use it respectfully. And you know what? It'll answer you. You get that response. And I always find here, if I do them now for people at my home, and I do them a lot for my family, my friends come round here, and I do a lot of private seances at my home. But when I do it with a family, it's really strange, because my family over the other side in the spirit world always insist they won't do anything before 9 o'clock. at night. Honestly, Patrick, it's really weird because if we start or we try to start at 8 o'clock, nothing happens. Nothing happens. The board just sits there. But as soon as it gets to 9 o'clock and I go, right, mummy, are you there? Or grandma, are you there? Whoever, family, are you there? Suddenly the board takes off and it starts moving. It starts going around. And they are so comical when you ask them the question. When you say, well, where were you before? And they'll say, oh, we were busy. We're busy. We didn't have time.
It was nap time. Leave me alone.
Yeah, totally. And I love the question. When everybody says to me, get somebody through the board, and you'll go, "How are you?" And instantly, on the other side, they'll come back and spell dead. So they have a real wicked sense of humour in a way. It's lovely. I love the humour what they have, and especially when they come through with certain things, and you're thinking, I know what they're going to spell out here. And there is no secrets with a board, I'm afraid, because they tell everybody your secrets, no matter who it is. They tell them everything about you.
You had a knowledge of spirit in the afterlife from an early age. And like you've said, you had a really awesome, supportive family and you've had mediumship in your family. Was it a spiritualist upbringing that you had?
No, it wasn't actually. No, it wasn't. My mother was Catholic. My father was Church of England. And basically, it was my mother's side that had this, they've always had this ability, they always had this ability with mediumship. And I remember, the priests used to sit with them in private seances. They used to do table levitation, all the physical mediumship. There's so much that they did. And for me, the thing that got me into it was the stories, what they used to tell me, the things that used to happen. And I remember from being a child, I used to get weird experiences where I'd be sat in a chair or sat somewhere on the stairs, and I'd just feel almost like somebody would come up behind me and just put a hand over my shoulder and just go, "You'll be okay, you'll be all right." So I suppose it was probably their way of telling me that I had the ability and that probably to start using that ability. But it never feared me at all, and I think probably what helped me was talking the family stories through and listening to what used to happen to the family when they were practicing their mediumship. My mother, my grandmother went on for many years. My grandmother used to read playing cards, just a normal set of playing cards to people, and it just fascinates me. I love the stories. And I think even from being an early child, I always had fascination with sort of past life experiences, places that we used to go as a child. And I used to think, I've been here before. There's something about this place that makes sense to me. And I think that goes on to talk about sort of fascinating things in history that have happened, like, the connections with the sinking of the Titanic, connections with Egyptians and Egyptology. And I think all these sort of things that come into play, for me, play part of my past life or part of me, part of my spirit. And I really love that when things start coming through.
Well, kudos to your family, because it is so refreshing hearing such a supportive story of growing up with this kind of thing. So many people that we talked to on this show didn't get that, or they had to struggle to find resources elsewhere, or had to, find the one or two books they could find in their school library growing up. That's really, really awesome that you had that.
Yeah. Do that's a really good point, I think, Patrick, that I get a lot of people that talk to me about this and go, well, where do I go to develop? Where do I go for the next stage? What do I do next? And I think, as you say, I probably was very lucky because my family always encouraged it in a way. They were never fearful of things like this. And I know for a lot of people, they're never quite sure of what's the next step, where do I go next? And for me, it's quite upsetting in a way, because depending where people are, sometimes there is nothing near them. There's no sort of spiritual tuition centers. There's nowhere to go to develop. They try and do things over the line, over the internet. And I get this with people where I've got a student at the moment in Switzerland, and he rings me up and we communicate over email, and I'm trying my best to help him. But it's not the same as having somebody sat in front of you and helping them to develop the mediumship.
So you do most of your, I'm guessing, reading and work in private, or do you do a lot of phone calls or, readings over the internet?
Yeah, yeah. I've got to say, we do a lot of majority of private readings over the internet, using things like Skype or phone readings, and we do them all over the globe, anywhere from America, South America, Australia, Europe, the Middle East. I literally go all over the globe with my readings, and it's never been a problem to me. I think as soon as I get this vibration of somebody's voice, you instantly create a link, or you get a link with them. And I think it's really important that, what we do this to support everybody. We go all around as much as we can. I still have people come to my home. I still do private readings in my home in the UK. I still do a lot of public demonstrations and public events. That can also include things like ghost hunts, for instance, as well, because people over here are absolutely fascinated by ghost hunts.
Right.
So I think it's brilliant that we can help people develop more. That's what I'll say. But I think definitely in terms of readings, we do a really good mixture between, let's say, UK-based ones, but then overseas ones as well.
Now, you said we several times. Can you tell us who is we?
Yeah, it's more me, to be honest. It's more me, that's my business. And, I always tend to talk of we when we talk about it, because I talk about me in the spirit world.
That's what I wondered.
Yeah.
So there are quite a few questions for you that my listeners have actually submitted for you today. And so I'll probably be sprinkling them throughout our conversation if we have time. And Karen Dahlman chimed in with a question that breaks my heart. She told me that you lost a fur baby recently, and so I'm so sorry.
Oh, I did. Yeah. And thank you. I really, really appreciate that. But do you know what, Patrick? She's been back to visit me already.
And that's what, and Karen says that I'm supposed to ask you how, your fur baby is doing, and what words and suggestions can they offer from either the for the pet kingdom or for humanity to assist us with the path of our transitioning fur babies.
I think it's one of those things, isn't it? When we lose them, because I always think an animal gives us total unconditional love, no matter what, and they're there 99.9% of our time. And I remember when I put my little Lou to sleep. Her name was Lulu, and I put her to sleep last Friday night. She was very poorly. She took ill on Friday, and it was so emotional for me to let her go. And I know I had to. I was a dad at the end of the day, and it was my decision. But literally the next morning, she appeared just outside of my little consultation room at home. Me and her sister were in my consultation room. We're having a little coffee and a cuddle, on the chair, and sat there talking away. And suddenly I seen this little grey figure just come to the door, have a look in the door. And it was almost as though she acknowledged us. I don't know how to say it to you. She almost acknowledged us. And in a way, she nodded her head as if to say, I'm just making sure you're okay. And then when I said, yeah, we're fine, she turned around and walked back out the door.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was lovely. It was just one of those moments where I thought, yeah, you needed to come back just to let us to check on us, but to also let us know that you were okay.
I had to tell you a story. I don't know that I've mentioned it on the show or not, but when I was in college, I think my freshman year in college, so I was not far from being just out on my own for the first time, and I was a kid who didn't leave home very often. So I was struggling a bit, and I was hurting because I was not at home for the death of my first pet. And she was 19 years old when she crossed over. And so I was sad that I missed it. And it was, I don't know if it was that evening or the next evening. And I'm sitting in my apartment an hour away from my parents' house, and suddenly I see her just walk through the entrance of my apartment and walk right past me, and then disappeared. And that just told me that she would have had no idea where I lived, but she knew how to find me. And at that time in my life, I kind of explained that away and didn't really think much about it. But thinking back to it now, I'm like, that was a cool little, visit from her that I got.
Yeah, and I believe that, they go up to the spirit world, they wait there with our loved ones, our families and people who've been in our lives. And when our time's right, we'll all meet up again, and I think that's a lovely experience what you had, because probably because she wasn't there, it was almost your pet's way of coming back to say, you know what, Patrick, I'm okay. Look, I'm just letting you know I'm all right.
You also you've mentioned it before, but you also like to read cards. How do you incorporate cards into your work?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to use angel cards. I tend to use obviously the normal sort of tarot cards. And the way that I tend to use that for people is when people want, number one, an element of guidance. I think the cards work very well. But also for people, the way that I use them is to get them very relaxed with me, because I think it's so difficult when somebody's sat in front of me and I just start talking at them with information. Whereas if I give them the cards, it's almost as though it breaks the ice a little bit with them. And I just go, there you go, just shuffle those for me. And when I'm ready, I'll tell you to pick 3 wherever you want. And sometimes I don't even tell them to pick them. And then I just take them off of them at the end, and then that's it. But it lets them calm down. It's letting them really get quite relaxed with me. And the worst thing is when I get somebody who's so nervous, because I always say to them, remember, if you're nervous, that makes me nervous. I pick up on that because that nervous energy starts vibrating through me. So, the way that I tend to use them, sometimes I do a very simple spread. Sometimes I'll get them to pick 3 or 4 cards at random, and we just use them almost to clarify the reading a little bit. So when I'm doing the mediumship side of it, I tend to come back to the cards just before the end, and I go, right, this is confirming what we've just discussed. This tells me what you was asking. And it's funny how the cards almost come in as a second clarification, I want to say.
Oh, okay.
But people enjoy them. They like you to use the cards.
I like what you said about kind of using it as confirmation. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. It is because, obviously as soon as a sitter comes into wherever it is, into my home or over the telephone, as soon as I built up that link, the information just starts coming out. I start building up this relationship with their family, their friends in the spirit world, and this information just begins to flow. And I think it's really important for people that when they get a reading or they come for a reading, that they walk away knowing that they've got the answers to what they wanted. And again, I always say to people, when you come to me, don't just sit there and be quiet. You need to acknowledge me. You need to open your mind up a little bit to what I'm saying. And sometimes, people do have to take things away with them. They have to take information away. But I always like it when they email me or they message me a few days later and they go, we found that name, we found that link, we know where you were with this. I did a reading for a lady yesterday, and it's very fresh in my mind, so I remember it. I don't normally remember readings, but I remember I think it was a father. I gave the name of the father. I gave a father's brother. I gave a father's sister's name. I gave a father's dad's name, his mother's name. So literally the spirit that I was working with was going through all the family with all the names. And it was one after another after another. And I thought, blimey, that is really, really good that the spirit's got enough energy to be able to give me that level of information. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't remember. If you get what I call a little bit of a difficult spirit, sometimes it's not always easy to work with them because some of them give you very sort of select information. They'll give you very limited information.
Have you ever done channeling, like trance channeling or physical mediumship or anything like that?
Yeah. I sit for trance and I sit for physical mediumship. We do both of them. In terms of physical, obviously I don't remember a lot of it, so I have to go on what my group give me the feedback of. Well, I don't remember any of it, to tell you the truth. But I know we've had hands form in the circle. We've had faces coming out of the wall in the room at the back of the room, and people have seen the faces. We've heard voices. We've heard babies crying in the room. Lots of sort of physical things, and a lot of movement around, obviously me, because I sit in the cabinet, but there's always a lot of colour, a lot of light, almost as though there's shadows moving around me. And I remember when we first started sitting physical, we used to hear almost like, I don't know how to say this, it wasn't a knock, but it was almost like a crack in the corner of the room, as though somebody had almost like opened a doorway, I suppose, in a way. And in a door, sometimes when you open a door that's not been open for a long time, it cracks almost as though it's gone a bit dry on the hinges. And we always used to get that a lot to start off with. And then suddenly we'd start getting movement in the room, or we'd start getting noises in the room, or these cold breezes taking place. And obviously, at the same time, we do an element of trance sometimes, and the trance comes through, and then we get an element of communication or voice take place, which is fascinating. But what we found with our group is that it seems to have moved from trance to physical now. So we're moving away slowly from the trance, but I still do trance demonstrations. I do them for a lot of my private groups that I help develop. Every so often they want to see me do a trance dem, or sometimes we'll try an element of physical. But when I do an element of physical, we like to be with our own sort of group so that things can be controlled. Because obviously for me, I haven't really got any control once I go into a deep state. And people have to then be able to know how to get me back, what music to play, anything like that. And as well to communicate. Again, as I say to anybody, when we're working with the spirit world, you've got to be able to have this two-way communication flow. And I like people to ask me questions when I'm in trance so that we get information out. And same with physical. My group constantly are singing to build up the energy. As soon as we've built up the energy, they'll start asking questions. If anybody's there, can you make a noise? Can you do something for us? And lo and behold, things start happening in the room, And as I say, we've had hands materialize in the middle of the circle. They felt children running around the room and touching the legs. So, there's a lot of movement taking place. And the difficult part for me is I don't see any of this because obviously I'm in a means of altered state.
So listening to you describe these experiences and the work with your group, it very much it's making me think of the skull experiments, the skull group. And I'm wondering, what other tools do you use in that kind of setting? Or are you a fan of using other tools in the room?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of physical, we always have the psychic trumpet in the room. We'll have a Ouija board in the room, and it'll always be placed somewhere with the pointer over certain letters or in a certain position. We tend to use a lot of sort of children's toys. So we use things like drums, xylophones, tambourines, anything that can make noise. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is get the spirit world to work with me and produce the ectoplasmic rods so that they can start moving things around the room. And it's fascinating when things do start moving and the trumpet starts moving. We want it to go up to the ceiling and, almost start going around and touching people is what we want with the psychic trumpet. So it is fascinating to see, and I love physical seances. I love the fact that we can prove that spirit are with us. I went to a physical seance that a friend of mine did a couple of years ago. And basically my mother came through in the direct voice and communicated with me. And it was very, very emotional for me, not only for me, but for people that knew me, because it's so hard when you're hearing that voice coming through and they're talking to you and you can recognize the voice. It's you almost freeze, I suppose I want to say to you. You freeze up and as much as you want to ask something, you're thinking, actually, I'm in a state of shock here and I don't know what to ask.
Let me just tell you, if I lived in the UK, I would be breaking down your door to get the opportunity to get into some of your group work. I've always wanted to do that. And I feel like being landlocked here in Missouri, there isn't often a lot going on in that area.
And I understand that because again, we find this, I live in a very, very rural area. As I mentioned earlier, I live in the middle of Sherwood Forest in the middle of the UK, and trying to find groups, trying to get to physical seances, I always end up having to travel, I'm afraid. And it's unfortunate, but that's how it works. I think once you're within that crowd though, and people recognize you and acknowledge you, you automatically get invited along to a lot of things. But we get a lot of physical groups over here. We seem to have a real opening of people wanting to develop the mediumship over here as well. And people aren't afraid of it. It's like they want to do it. And I think the way that I look at it with mediumship and with any sort of spiritual side really is that this is all part of life, and I say to people, I'm a spiritual human being, I want to do right by people, I want to see the good in people all the time. And it's not always easy, because sometimes we put our trust in people that it doesn't always go in the right direction. Let me say that for us. But, I think we'll always continue to do that, and we'll continue to help people develop. I run 3 groups a month now, development groups, and you can guarantee that we got on average probably 20 people to each group. And that's fantastic, because it shows that people are wanting to come to relieve stress, to get rid of their anxieties. It's not all about working with the spirit world. Sometimes it's just an individual that wants to come along just to get away from everyday life and just sit, maybe meditate, sit and relax, maybe even do a little bit of healing or take some healing, and I think this is the nice thing about development groups. They've advanced so much over the years now, but will it ever get back to what we used to have many years ago over here, where going back into, the war times, the 1940s, 50s, and before that, where we had very, very serious, and I always say they were heavy spiritual groups, where everybody practiced things like physical mediumship. We put in a lot more time. And, modern society now, what with technology, what with computers, things like that, it's really very different now for people, isn't it?
Yeah. And you actually, from what I know of you and your work and your conversation with Karen Dahlman, I know that you are really into health of the mind, body, and spirit. And that is something I don't often hear combined with, a development group.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, because I always think that it's like me, for instance. If I'm tired, I won't do readings for people, because I know in my mind I can't give the best that I possibly could. And I always say to people, remember that in terms of what we do, you've got to have a clear mind, you've got to be relaxed. It's no good being tired and going into a physical trance demonstration or physical or trance demonstration, because what will happen, the spirit world recognize this, and they almost go, what, you're tired tonight? No, we're not doing it. It's not going to work tonight. So you've got to be very conscious of this when we look at it. And I think a lot of people at times find it hard because they don't look after all the parts of the spirit, let's call it that. They don't look after the mind, the body, and then the spirit. And I think what we've got to do is consider things like people's well-being, consider people's health conditions, how they feeling, what's going through the mind, have they had a tough day at work, and all these things. And it plays a huge, huge part. If you can get everything lined up in your life, which takes a lot of doing, the way that you work with the spirit world automatically starts happening or reacting.
Who are your biggest influences in the work that you do?
In terms of the mediumship side?
Yeah, or anything that comes to mind, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot. There is a lot of people, some of the great mediums of our time in the UK, people like, Helen Duncan, Estelle Roberts, Doris Stokes. I had the pleasure of not only having Colin Fry as a very good friend of mine for 20 years, but also having the pleasure of touring with him for his final 2 years before he passed to the spirit world himself. And there's some fantastic, I have some great friends who are mediums over here. Even people like Karen I admire because of how she works, how she teaches, what she talks about. I've got other friends over here in the UK who, the way that they work and operate is just fantastic, because I don't believe in overcomplicating what we do with the spirit world. It's just a communication. It's passing information from one side to another. And I think so long as we can keep that link going, it will always continue. But some of the great, great people over here, as I say, people like Estelle Roberts, Helen Duncan. Helen Duncan was a physical medium and, was imprisoned for a gift for her ability,
right.
Imprisoned numerous times for it. And these are people that have fought to get us where we are now, people that have fought to get us recognized, let's call it that. Gordon Higginson, Gordon went on obviously with the SNU and the SNU Spiritualist National Union over here. is massive. You know, it's a really big society where we all aiming for the same direction. You know, we all want it to get to a point for us.
I think that's the first mention I've ever heard anyone talk about the SNU. I'm not even sure I knew about that group.
Yeah, the SNU over here is the main college is at the moment is down near Stansted Airport, which is just outside of London. And it's a beautiful college. You know, it's called the Arthur Findlay College.
Oh yeah.
Anybody that's interested, have a look. But obviously, that's where the Spiritualist National Union are based. You know, we have a lot of our sort of spiritual churches that are affiliated to the SNU, and it's almost like a governing body, I suppose, in a way. You know, who recognise what people do and support what people do. But then we have a lot of independents as well. We have a lot of independent churches, what people have set up. And I was on the education board for the SNU for a long time, you know, running workshops, training sessions, helping people develop. And then I started doing my own, you know, and I've done my own now for probably somewhere in the region of 15 odd years, probably more thinking about it, probably getting on for nearly 20 years thinking about that. But, you know, it's good that you have it being taken seriously over here. You know, there's that real sort of support. It's almost like I'll call it an education board in a way that helps people develop in the correct way.
Absolutely. So I want to make sure I get a chance to ask some of these listener questions. And Tara has one that I think would be a good question to ask at this point. And Tara says, why do I have more trouble connecting with deceased loved ones that I was super close to than with more distant relatives or strangers? Is it that way for other mediums?
Ooh, blimey, that's a really, really good question. Right. One of the things I always look at with people when they come to me for readings and they want to connect to, say, a mother figure that's just passed, you know, maybe within weeks. And I always say to them, are you ready to communicate? And they go, what do you mean by that? And I say, right, remember, if you'll get upset, the spirit world sometimes almost like back away a little bit to go, they're not quite ready yet. We don't want to communicate yet, because if we communicate, we know emotionally we're going to upset them. So they'll almost stand in the background, let's call it, you know. And this is what I find sometimes when I'm going through circumstances where I want to ask a personal question of my loved ones. And sometimes they'll go, oh, not the right moment. We're not going to answer it yet. We're not going to come to you yet because you're too emotional to deal with the answer, or I'm too emotional, full stop. So I think we've always got to be mindful that they will come when the time is right. And I think it's so much easier for me doing a reading for somebody that I don't know, because the spirit, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It's not one that I recognize. So the information will just flow. Whereas for me, if it's a tough time in my life or something's happened, like last weekend, for instance, you know, the spirit will pull away from me a little bit and go, no, you need your time just to grieve. You need your time just to shed a few tears. And when you've shed a few tears, we'll come through and we'll talk to you again. So I think for anybody in terms of trying to connect with a loved one, the only question I would ask is it too raw at that moment in time? Is it too difficult? Will you get upset if anything happens? And, you know, do you just need a little bit of healing time at the moment? But normally, you know, 9 out of 10 times, if you're in the right place and you want to talk to your mother, your father, your husband, whoever it is, your wife, you know, they'll always come through and prove a presence in some way.
Do you think it might have anything to do with, like, when you're close to someone, or you know, the information you're trying to get from them? Is it because it might affect our growth, you know, the journey that we're on, and maybe that's not supposed to be the way we find that answer? You know what I'm trying to say?
Well, that's a good one, because that's a different avenue altogether. Because I think sometimes when we're in a predicament and we want to know an answer to an outcome, or we want to know what's going to happen to us in 6 months, the spirit world automatically shut down and almost go, you need to experience it before we tell you it's coming. And, you know, I think they can be very hard with us at times and almost go, you know what, no, we're not telling you the answer to it because you will find out, or you don't need to know. And, you know, I've always had this policy with the spirit world that they will give you what you need, not what you want.
Right.
You know, it's a little bit like going into it and going, right, you know, in a year's time, am I going to win the lottery? Am I going to win a lot of money? And they'll go, oh, it's not important to you. It doesn't make you a better person. And I love the conversation with the spirit world, because sometimes when I'm talking to them, I sit there and I go, yeah, I know what you mean by that now. I know you tried to tell me off in a very polite way and go, it's not important. Don't worry about it. So I think as much as it's great working with the spirit world, sometimes they really do put us in our place.
I really want to make sure I ask this question from Kathy because it is cracking me up. Kathy says, have you ever connected with someone only to realize that this person had a negative attachment? And this is my favorite part of her question, because she says, and do you believe in demons or just ass souls?
Oh, I like that one. Oh, that's really, really good. Right. See, the thing is, I get this question all the time from people. And it's like when we talk about certain words, we talk about evil, we talk about demons. And I always go, well, what are you referring to? Because, if I brought any of my family through, I know none of my family were, demons. I know none of them were evil. I had a grandfather that was a miserable grandfather, and he always was miserable and probably always will be miserable, but I really struggle with things like this because I like the spirit world. I'm not saying that everybody's a perfect character and a perfect spirit and a perfect soul. There are people out there that have done things in their life that, number one, I think they'll greatly regret when they go over to the other side. But I also have this belief that when we go over to the other side, we almost look back over our life. We value our life of what we've done right and wrong. And I think then that's when we look at our payback, we almost go, well, I shouldn't have done that. And now I'm going to get told off for doing it, that sort of feeling. And I think certainly over the other side, I've never had anything that's certainly not come through on a demon level, but I've had things that have come through that have made me feel uncomfortable, things that have probably just given me that sort of spine tingling feeling, that chilling feeling that you just feel like somebody's just walked over your grave. And then I go, right, okay, are you okay to come through, or would you sooner me not open the doorway to you and allow you to go back? So I think to answer the question, I think it's that whole perception again, what we look at in terms of TV and movies a lot of the time, where, let's be honest, anything nowadays that we see on TV that's related to the spirit world, it's always done very sort of negatively. It's always very harmful to people. It's always made out that the spirit's coming to attack somebody or attach themselves to somebody. And you see, again, with attachments, for myself, when I go into haunted buildings, I'm doing paranormal work, whatever you wish to call it, I always go, right, you better look after me upstairs, make sure that I'm safe, make sure that nothing goes home with me. But I have had it before where I've done an event where a spirit will come back with me. And I remember one circumstance many, many years ago where in the middle of the night, my kettle kept boiling, kept boiling hot water. And every time I went downstairs, it would turn off. Every time I went back upstairs, it would turn back on. And in the end, I had to take the kettle off the stand and put it on the side to stop it keep turning itself on and off.
Well, that's not concerning at all.
Yeah. And you see, I know that I brought somebody home that night, and I had to, in my mind, close that doorway and go, right, no, you're leaving. You don't belong with me. You don't belong in my house. Thank you very much. Now be on your way. And lo and behold, they disappear. So it does happen. It does happen.
Right. That would make me nervous a bit. That would make me want to cut the cord to the stove or something.
I think I'm so used to it now. Every time I leave let's call it a haunted venue, I always go, right, you stay where you are. Leave me to go home.
James wants to know, what is your view on UFOs?
Oh, right. Okay. Gosh, somebody else asked me this the other day. I have to be honest and say I've never experienced it. And when I say that, that's not the point that I don't believe it. I've never experienced anything. So until I get that experience of UFOs or of other beings, I want to go, it needs to be proven to me at the moment. But I want to add this in. that doesn't mean to say that I don't believe. I just think that there's something there that we need to investigate and decide whether it exists or not.
Do you think maybe like some people are more prone to be able to connect with spirit? Maybe some people are more prone to be able to connect with UFOs, because some people, I've talked to mediums who said their first communication they felt were with UFOs.
Yeah, I think there certainly is almost like, let's call it a level that we all play at, you know, where some people can connect better, etc. And some people have probably had experiences of it. You know, it's one of the things that's always fascinates me, you know, and I think the universe out there is so vast that we can't possibly all experience the same thing. And that's a little bit like the spirit world, when, you know, certain mediums can connect with certain, let's call it certain levels of spirit, and others connect with another level of spirit. And I think this is where it's important that we remember that, you know, I always have this belief as well that some mediums aren't for everybody at the end of the day. You know, you'll go to see one medium and you're more comfortable with them and they'll get a very good connection. You'll go to another medium and you might not get a good connection at all with them. So, but again, that's just part of the experience, I suppose I want to say, you know. But yeah, you know, by all means, I'm open to talk to anybody about it. So if anybody's got any stories or anything they want to share with me about, you know, UFOs and other beings, by all means, I'm more than happy to listen to them.
Well, I had to tell you, this has been like the easiest, smoothest, wonderful, positive conversation. And it's been, the time has gone by so fast. It's been a blast, has it not?
It has, totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm absolutely stunned that we've come to the end.
I know, like the time went seriously really fast. But I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to give us any of your final thoughts, and also just kind of tell us what's coming up and the kind of services and things that you offer. And I guess also hit on things that, you know, I do have lots of listeners from the UK, but also, you know, here on our side of the pond, how can people get more Barrie John in their lives?
Yeah, perfect. I mean, you know, thank you very much for letting us obviously share the show with you, which is such a privilege, you know, and we're happy to do it anytime. And, you know, we love hearing from people that are listening to the shows. You know, my first comment would be, if you want to develop your ability, just keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. You know, working with the spirit world is very, very straightforward. You know, I work all over the globe. You know, I have no problems where I go. So we're doing obviously a lot of shows this year. We're getting into more things this year. So have a look on our website, which is www.barriejohn.com. Have a look on Facebook, follow us on Facebook, message us on Facebook. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. You know, we're all over the place. But, you know, just keep looking, because, you know, we've always got things like paranormal investigations, what we do, stage demonstrations, theatre demonstrations, you know, small intimate evenings that I do. I'm all over the UK at the moment with well-being events and, you know, talking to people about what we said about the mind, body and spirit. We'll be doing lots more spiritual retreats this year, so they're all coming up very soon as well. So, you know, this year for us is really, really very busy. I mean, last week, I took 40 new venues last week for demonstrations. And, you know, each one of those will probably have 2 or 3 shows out this year. So we are literally all over the country, up and down in every direction. In a few weeks, I'm over in Wales, working on the west coast of Wales. So, you know, again, well-being event, we're doing a ghost hunt, I'm doing a demonstration, I'm doing a workshop, I'm doing readings all weekend. So it's a really full-on weekend for me. But yeah, have a look at the website, www.barriejohn.com.
Barrie John, you rock.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's an honor and a privilege to talk to you, Patrick. It really is. I've heard so much about you from our mutual friend, the wonderful Dahlman, who I love to bits. She's like my spiritual sister.
Oh, well, that makes me nervous because her and I like to nerd out a lot.
But I'll tell you what, one day, hopefully we can all nerd out together. There you go.
thank you to the following super paranerds who support the show at patreon.com/Big Seance. Genesis, Diana Lloyd, Natalie, Sonia B, Kim Robb, Jim Budd, Josia Lorenzo, Susan Davey, and Paula Mitchell. My supporters at the Parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/Parlor guests, are Linda of shimmeringmoons.com, Denise Sia of Mystic Moms Paranormal, Joni Kuntz, Sylvie, Jeffrey Peck, Dina DeCastro of Dina DeCastro Astrology, Peggy Hagan, Sharon Bowles, Marion Hover Clairvoyant, Bruce Williams, Christopher Kohler, Lena and John of Carbon Lilies, Anna Frias, Norman and Linda Keller, and Karen Prine. That sound you just heard was the above and beyond there's not even a category for your level of support fireworks display. Because I have an awesome listener who chooses to remain anonymous, who supports the show at the $10 level. Thank you, Paranerds.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. You can find and subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and just about anywhere podcasts are found. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.